Osama bin Laden, a pivotal figure in history, came into the world on March 10, 1957. His birthplace has been a subject of debate, initially believed to be Jeddah in Western Arabia, but now generally accepted as Riyadh, the capital of Saudi Arabia. His father, Mohammed bin Awad bin Laden, born in Yemen in 1908, migrated with his family to the Red Coast of Western Arabia in the 1930s, amid territorial disputes between the Ottoman Empire and the Saud dynasty. In the 1930s, Mohammed emerged as a successful construction contractor, securing contracts under the patronage of Saudi Arabia's first ruler, Abdul Aziz bin Saud. His company, the Saudi Bin Laden Group, thrived alongside the nation's rising as a global oil exporter. Osama's mother, Hamida Alatas, hailed from a prominent Syrian family near Latakia. She married Mohammed at a young age, becoming his 10th wife. Their union bore Osama in 1957, the sole child of Mohammed and Hamida. Raised in opulence, Osama spent his early years in his mother's household, later joined by step-siblings from Hamida's remarriage to Mohammed al-Atas. Yet, his father's influence remained profound, instilling conservative religious values in him. Osama's educational journey began in Jeddah's Al-Taghir Model School, followed by a stint at Oxford University in 1971 for an English language course. Despite his privileged upbringing, Osama displayed typical interests of youth, such as a passion for football, particularly Arsenal Football Club, and an intrigue with military history. The Saudi bin Laden Group held a prestigious position in the Arab world, with extensive ties to the Saudi royal family. Their projects, including the upkeep of mosques in Mecca and Medina, underscored their significance. However, tragedy struck in 1967 when Mohammed perished in a plane accident at 59. Despite this loss, the Saudi bin Laden Group continued to thrive under new leadership. During the 1970s and 1980s, the Saudi bin Laden Group underwent significant diversification, transforming into a multi-billion-dollar enterprise with lucrative contracts spanning the Middle East. However, young Osama remained distanced from the family business following his father's passing, as he focused on his education. At the age of 19, in 1976, Osama enrolled at King Abdulaziz University in Jeddah, embarking on studies in economics and business administration, presumably with aspirations of joining the family business in the future. Despite this trajectory, indications surfaced that Osama's interests were veering away from commerce. Accounts from acquaintances at the university suggested his primary passions lay in religion, poetry, and Arab literature. Nevertheless, financial concerns were alleviated by his inheritance from his father's estate, estimated at upwards of $30 million. By this time, he had also entered matrimony with Najwa Kanem, his first wife and cousin, at the tender age of 17. This union marked the beginning of a polygamous journey that would see Osama fathering over 24 children. The late 1970s proved pivotal for Osama's ideological evolution. While historical records from this period are somewhat fragmented and occasionally contradictory, the overarching narrative is clear. Osama began to espouse a pan-Islamist ideology, advocating for the unification of Muslims worldwide in the defense and propagation of their faith. This worldview harkened back to the era of the Arab Caliphate, seeking to diminish Western interference in the Middle East, a region historically influenced by British and French colonialism. Amidst geopolitical turbulence, Osama found inspiration in the writings of Sayyid Qutb, an Egyptian Islamic scholar and political theorist. Qutb's advocacy for Islamic Jihad and the imposition of Sharia law resonated deeply with Osama, fueling his anti-Western sentiments. Notably, Qutb's brother Muhammad, a proponent of his ideologies, taught at King Abdulaziz University during Osama's tenure as a student. As Osama concluded his studies at the university in 1979, the Islamic world stood at a crossroads. The Iranian Revolution had ousted the Western-backed Shah, establishing an Islamic state under Ayatollah Khomeini's leadership. Concurrently, Afghanistan plunged into chaos following the Marxist PDPA's rise to power. Moscow's subsequent intervention in Afghanistan in late 1979 marked a turning point, drawing global attention to the region's geopolitical complexities. Against this backdrop, Osama journeyed to Pakistan, a pivotal hub for international jihadist movements, shortly after completing his studies. Pakistan's strategic significance in shaping 20th and early 21st century jihadist movements underscores the profound impact of regional dynamics on Osama's ideological trajectory. The country professed opposition to Islamic fundamentalism within its borders, yet turned a blind eye to its existence, largely due to its enduring Cold War with Hindu-majority India since the partition of the British Raj in 1947. This geopolitical tension laid the groundwork for bin Laden's entanglement with Pakistan over the ensuing decades. Upon his arrival in 1979, bin Laden swiftly found himself under the mentorship of Abdullah Azzam, a Palestinian-born jihadist who wielded significant influence over many prominent Islamic extremists. Encouraged by Azzam, bin Laden joined the ranks of the Mujahideen, swelling in number as tens of thousands of Muslim men journeyed to Afghanistan to combat the atheist Soviet invaders. Utilizing his inherited fortune, bin Laden financed and trained Mujahideen fighters in Pakistan before dispatching them to the rugged terrain of Afghanistan. However, his financial contributions paled in comparison to the extensive support provided by the United States and Saudi Arabia to anti-Soviet forces in the region. Despite exaggerated claims of bin Laden's direct financing and training by American agents, evidence suggests limited contacts with U.S. Special Forces in the 1980s. The conflict in Afghanistan mirrored historical patterns, with Soviet forces dominating urban areas while Mujahideen factions, ranging from moderate to fundamentalist, controlled rural regions, particularly the formidable Hindu Kush Mountains. The ensuing warfare exacted a devastating toll, displacing millions and resulting in hundreds of thousands of casualties, reminiscent of America's Vietnam War experience for the Soviets. Throughout this tumultuous period, bin Laden emerged as a prominent figure within the Mujahideen movement, facilitating the flow of fighters and supplies from Saudi Arabia to Pakistan and Afghanistan. In collaboration with Azzam, bin Laden established Maktab al-Hidamat in 1984, a fundraising and training organization pivotal in shaping the jihadist movement. By 1986, al-Masada, bin Laden's base, trained hundreds of fighters who played a crucial role in the Battle of Jaji in 1987, enhancing bin Laden's reputation among the Mujahideen and the broader Arab world. Concurrently, the establishment of Maktab al-Hilmat laid the foundation for Al-Qaeda, envisioned as a larger, more extremist organization dedicated to expelling non-Arab powers from the Muslim world. Thus, in 1988, Al-Qaeda was born, heralding the emergence of the world's largest jihadist organization. Over the years, Al-Qaeda grew in influence and notoriety, expanding its reach beyond Afghanistan to become a global force in jihadist movements. Bin Laden, along with his compatriots, advocated for a more aggressive approach, seeking to challenge and confront perceived threats to Islam and the Muslim world. As the Soviet-backed regime in Afghanistan faltered in the late 1980s, discussions arose within the jihadist community about the future direction of their movement. While some advocated for moderation and continued resistance against Soviet influence, bin Laden, Abdullah Azzam, and other like-minded individuals pushed for a more radical agenda. Their vision culminated in the formation of Al-Qaeda in 1988, signaling a shift towards a more aggressive and expansive jihadist agenda. The name Al-Qaeda, meaning the base or the foundation, encapsulated their ambition to establish a robust and enduring network committed to advancing their extremist ideology. In the years that followed, Al-Qaeda emerged as a formidable force, orchestrating numerous terrorist attacks around the world and drawing recruits from various corners of the globe. Bin Laden's leadership and strategic vision played a pivotal role in shaping the organization's trajectory. cementing his status as one of the most notorious figures in modern history. Al-Qaeda, notorious worldwide, harbored a grand ambition from its very inception: to wage holy war, or jihad, against non-Muslims across the traditional Muslim world. This encompassed regions spanning from the Middle East to Lower Central Asia, including North Africa's Maghreb, as well as peripheral areas like Somalia, Mali, Nigeria, and Sub-Saharan Africa. Their ideological framework revolved around expelling American influence from the Middle East and dismantling the State of Israel, viewed as a Western stronghold in the Levant. As time progressed, Al-Qaeda deemed it imperative to incite a major conflict against the United States to galvanize the Muslim world against non-Muslims, or kafirs. Initially unable to engage in conventional conflicts, Al-Qaeda relied on terrorist tactics during its formative years. The group also sought to impose a strict form of Islamic governance based on Sharia law and a literal interpretation of the Quran, viewing moderate Muslims as deviating from true Islamic principles. By the time Al-Qaeda emerged in 1988, the Soviet Union's involvement in Afghanistan was already winding down. Despite Mikhail Gorbachev's intent to end Soviet engagement in the country, withdrawing troops was a gradual process akin to America's protracted exit from Vietnam. As the Soviets surged troop numbers in a bid for victory, the Reagan administration provided substantial military aid to the Mujahideen, including Stinger missiles that proved devastating against Soviet helicopters. The tide turned in favor of the Mujahideen, leading to peace accords in 1988 and the complete withdrawal of Soviet forces by 1989. Subsequently, the Marxist regime in Afghanistan crumbled, paving the way for Mujahideen power struggles and ultimately the rise of the Taliban in 1996. Yet, their grip on the country remained contested, with the Northern Alliance retaining control over significant territories well into the late 1990s and early 2000s. Following the Soviet-Afghan War's conclusion, Bin Laden returned to his homeland of Saudi Arabia in 1989, greeted with adulation for his pivotal role in expelling the Russians from Afghanistan. Eager to harness the economic prowess and extensive business networks of his family's conglomerate, the Saudi Bin Laden Group, he sought to bolster Al-Qaeda's growth. Simultaneously, he forged alliances with key figures in the Islamic jihadist movement, expanding his influence beyond borders. However, tensions simmered between bin Laden and the Saudi government as his confrontational stance against non-Muslims clashed with the kingdom's alignment with the United States. Disputes escalated over matters like the South Yemen Civil War, where bin Laden advocated for Saudi intervention, but Riyadh opposed. The invasion of Kuwait by Saddam Hussein in 1990 further strained relations, prompting the deployment of American troops to Saudi Arabia, a move vehemently opposed by bin Laden. In a bid to safeguard the kingdom from Iraqi aggression, bin Laden proposed deploying his Arab Legion to defend Saudi borders, a proposal rebuffed by King Fahd. As coalition forces amassed in Saudi Arabia for Operation Desert Storm, bin Laden's denouncements of the royal family as collaborators with Western infidels exacerbated tensions. His attempts to rally religious scholars against the American presence led to his expulsion from Saudi Arabia in 1991. Seeking refuge, bin Laden relocated to Sudan in 1992, finding sanctuary under the Sharia law regime established by Colonel Omar al-Bashir. Invited by Sudanese leader Hassan al-Turabi, he established a fortified compound for al-Qaeda operations, guarded by devoted followers, armed with sophisticated weaponry. Following the Soviet-Afghan War, bin Laden returned to Saudi Arabia in 1989, hailed as a hero for his role in expelling the Russians. Back home, he aimed to bolster al-Qaeda by leveraging his family's business, the Saudi Bin Laden Group. Simultaneously, he networked with leading Islamic jihadists across Egypt and beyond. However, tensions arose between bin Laden and the Saudi government over intervention in the South Yemen Civil War and Saddam Hussein's invasion of Kuwait. The Gulf War triggered a rift as bin Laden opposed U.S. military presence in Saudi Arabia, which he saw as a betrayal of Islam. His offer to defend Saudi borders against Iraq was rebuffed, deepening his animosity towards the royal family. Bin Laden's anti-American rhetoric intensified, leading to his expulsion from Saudi Arabia in 1991. Settling in Sudan in 1992, bin Laden found refuge under Omar al-Bashir's regime, marked by the imposition of Sharia law. Sudan's sponsorship of terrorism drew U.S. scrutiny, prompting constant surveillance. By 1996, escalating tensions and economic sanctions forced bin Laden's departure to Afghanistan, where he declared war on the U.S. and intensified terrorist activities targeting Western interests. In Afghanistan, bin Laden found sanctuary under the Taliban regime, which shared his anti-American sentiment. He declared war against the U.S. in August 1996, citing grievances over American military presence in Saudi Arabia and support for Israel. Financial setbacks and Sudan's expulsion compounded bin Laden's radicalization, propelling him towards a relentless campaign of terrorism against the U.S. Al-Qaeda's aggression towards the West escalated, culminating in the 1998 bombings of the U.S. embassies in Tanzania and Kenya. These coordinated attacks, executed with precision and immense destructive force, claimed hundreds of lives and left thousands injured. Bin Laden's notoriety soared as he became one of the FBI's most wanted individuals, drawing global attention to Al-Qaeda's escalating threat. Despite warnings, the full extent of the organization's danger was not fully comprehended by Western intelligence agencies. Bin Laden's anti-American rhetoric only intensified in the aftermath of these devastating bombings, signaling a dark chapter of terror yet to unfold. Bin Laden's grievances were wide-ranging, encompassing U.S. support for Israel and regimes persecuting Muslims globally, from Russia's actions in Chechnya to India's oppression in Kashmir. However, his primary concern was the presence of American troops near Islam's holiest sites in Saudi Arabia. In 1998, Al-Qaeda highlighted this occupation, setting the stage for more significant attacks. Turning their focus to the U.S., Al-Qaeda targeted the World Trade Center, a site already attacked in 1993. Bin Laden approved the plan in 1999, selecting English-speaking operatives familiar with Western society. By 2000, 19 individuals were primed across the U.S., with the Twin Towers and the Pentagon marked as key targets. September 11, 2001, was chosen for its historical significance, evoking a past Muslim victory. On that fateful day, 19 hijackers executed their plan, crashing planes into iconic American landmarks. The devastating attacks killed thousands and left indelible scars on the nation's psyche. Initially denying involvement, bin Laden later admitted responsibility, citing symbolic retaliation for past injustices. As evidence mounted, the U.S. swiftly acted, authorizing military force against both bin Laden and the Taliban regime sheltering him. On September 18, 2001, a joint congressional resolution authorized the use of force against those responsible for the attacks, including the Taliban regime harboring bin Laden. Subsequently, American and British forces commenced airstrikes on strategic targets in Afghanistan on October 7, 2001. These actions were supported by alliances with factions like the Northern Alliance, holding territory against the Taliban in northern Afghanistan. The objective was clear: dismantle the Taliban regime and capture or eliminate bin Laden and his Al-Qaeda network. This marked the beginning of the war in Afghanistan, a response to the deadliest terrorist attacks in history. As the conflict unfolded, it would reshape geopolitics and security paradigms worldwide. U.S. special operatives began infiltrating Afghanistan in late September, but the principal land invasion commenced on October 19th, with American troops joined by allies from numerous nations. The initial phase of the war saw swift success for the coalition forces. By early November, Kabul was encircled, and a crucial airstrike on November 12th eliminated one of bin Laden's top aides, Mohammed Atef. Subsequently, Northern Alliance and U.S. troops entered Kabul, while Taliban forces retreated to Kandahar. Their resistance collapsed by late November, leading to surrender in early December. Despite establishing an interim administration with Hamid Karzai as president, this victory proved fleeting, as insurgent revolts soon plagued Afghanistan, eluding U.S. suppression efforts and leaving bin Laden at large. During the fall of Kandahar, a coalition of Allied and Northern Alliance fighters, including U.S. Special Forces, engaged in the Battle of Tora Bora against Al-Qaeda, militants believed to include bin Laden. Though intelligence suggested his presence, he evaded capture as the coalition lacked the strength to apprehend him. Bin Laden's evasion elevated him to the most wanted status, with a $25 million bounty escalating to $50 million in 2007. Despite his elusive movements, he remained a persistent threat to Western security, primarily residing in Pakistan in the years following his escape from Afghanistan in 2001. A cautious approach to capturing bin Laden was adopted, despite his evident presence in Pakistan. The U.S. intelligence services faced the challenge of locating him within the country, with lukewarm support from Pakistani security services at best. Bin Laden is believed to have spent much of his time in Waziristan, a mountainous region near the Afghan border. Reports in the late 2000s occasionally suggested he might have crossed into Iran, but these claims were likely unfounded. In reality, bin Laden and Al-Qaeda enjoyed relative comfort and freedom in Pakistan for years, with tacit support from influential elements within the country's politics and security apparatus. Meanwhile, bin Laden and Al-Qaeda persisted in organizing terrorist activities across the Muslim world. While security measures in the U.S. made attacks there more challenging post 9/11, Western targets in the Middle East were plentiful. Following the invasion of Afghanistan, the focus shifted to Iraq, where the U.S. and its allies intervened in 2003, citing concerns over weapons of mass destruction and alleged links to bin Laden. However, the invasion faced criticism from some allies who viewed it as a pretext for regime change and neo-imperialism. While the initial victory over Saddam Hussein's regime seemed swift, it was followed by a protracted insurgency. Bin Laden and Al-Qaeda exploited sectarian divisions in Iraq, orchestrating attacks to incite civil strife. One such incident was the bombing of the Al-Askari shrine in Samarra in February 2006, triggering deadly sectarian violence. Despite stabilization efforts, Al-Qaeda persisted, orchestrating bombings in Baghdad and a suicide attack on the Shiite Imam Hussein shrine in Karbala in March 2008, resulting in numerous casualties. Construction of a purpose-built compound in Abbottabad, Pakistan, began shortly after bin Laden's arrival in 2002 and was completed in 2005. Situated on a 38,000 square foot estate, the compound was fortified with a concrete perimeter fence reaching up to 5.5 meters in height, topped with barbed wire. The design minimized windows and included screens to obscure views of the interior, ensuring privacy for bin Laden, who stood at 6 foot 4 inches tall. The authorities likely noted the unusual security measures of the property, which was most likely bin Laden's residence from 2006 onward, accommodating him, his wives, children, and associates. Despite providing shelter for many years, bin Laden's reliance on the compound ultimately led to his downfall. In 2009, U.S. intelligence identified Abu Ahmed al-Kuwaiti, a close associate who served as bin Laden's courier. By 2010, the CIA had located al-Kuwaiti in Abbottabad, leading to surveillance of the compound. Despite extensive efforts and advanced surveillance technology, the CIA couldn't obtain concrete evidence of bin Laden's presence. However, by early 2011, the circumstantial evidence was convincing enough for U.S. President Barack Obama to authorize Operation Neptune Spear on May 1, 2011. 2 Black Hawk helicopters transported Navy SEALs to the compound in Abbottabad, where a brief firefight ensued before the SEALs entered the main building. President Obama and officials monitored the operation from the Situation Room in the White House. Inside the compound, bin Laden's son and al-Kuwaiti were shot before the SEALs located bin Laden on the 3rd floor. Amid conflicting accounts, it's likely that a SEAL named Matt shot bin Laden, killing him instantly. Bin Laden was found with cash and phones sewn into his robes. After securing the compound, Bin Laden's body was swiftly disposed of at sea to prevent his grave from becoming a shrine. The raid's success was confirmed in Washington, and President Obama announced it to the nation. Despite Bin Laden's demise, the threat from jihadist movements persisted, with groups like Al-Qaeda in Iraq emerging as significant threats. During the early stages of countering the U.S. occupation, in 2006, al-Zarqawi and his close allies merged to form the Islamic State of Iraq. Over the following years, they gained strength but also adopted increasingly brutal methods, targeting Muslims who didn't adhere to strict Sharia law. As U.S. forces withdrew from Iraq in the early 2010s, Al-Qaeda distanced itself from the Islamic State's extreme approach, leading to a split between the two groups under Al-Qaeda's new leader, Ayman al-Zawahiri. The Islamic State of Iraq gained prominence following the Arab Spring in 2011 and capitalized on the Syrian civil war and Iraq's instability. Led by Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi, they established control over large territories, declaring an Islamic caliphate. Their brutality, even surpassing Al-Qaeda's, drew international attention. However, between 2014 and 2017, U.S. intervention and local resistance weakened ISIL's grip on the region. By the early 2020s, Islamic fundamentalism appeared to decline, influenced by improving living standards in the Middle East, reduced U.S. nation-building efforts, and improved relations between Israel and some Muslim nations. Yet, the threat shifted to the Sahel region, where jihadist groups destabilized countries like Mali, Niger, Chad, and Burkina Faso. Meanwhile, the Taliban's resurgence in Afghanistan followed the U.S. withdrawal in 2021. Osama Bin Laden, a pivotal figure in modern Islamic fundamentalism, was radicalized in the 1970s and fueled by anti-Americanism and a commitment to wider Islamic fundamentalism. Despite initially fighting against the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan, he extended his agenda beyond resisting non-Muslim incursions. His actions, including the Gulf War opposition and the infamous 9/11 attacks, marked him in history as a symbol of violent extremism. The 9/11 attacks left an indelible mark, claiming thousands of lives and altering global perceptions of security. Bin Laden's death in 2011, although ignominious, symbolized a milestone in countering extremism. However, the world continues to grapple with the consequences of his actions, prompting reflection on whether his capture alive for trial would have served justice better. The September 11th terrorist attacks in 2001 marked one of the darkest days in modern history, leaving an indelible mark on the world. Nearly 3,000 innocent lives were lost as hijacked planes crashed into the World Trade Center towers in New York City, the Pentagon in Arlington, Virginia, and a field in Shanksville, Pennsylvania. The economic toll was staggering, with the estimated cost of the attacks reaching over $3 trillion in the United States alone. In the aftermath of 9/11, the United States launched the War on Terror, targeting terrorist organizations, including Al-Qaeda, responsible for orchestrating the attacks. The war led to significant military involvement in Afghanistan and Pakistan, with billions of dollars spent on combat operations, intelligence gathering, and efforts to eliminate terrorist threats. One of the most significant milestones in the War on Terror was the killing of Osama bin Laden, the mastermind behind the 9/11 attacks. After a decade-long hunt, U.S. Navy SEALs conducted a raid on bin Laden's compound in Abbottabad, Pakistan in May 2011. The operation, codenamed Operation Neptune Spear, resulted in bin Laden's death and dealt a major blow to Al-Qaeda. Despite significant efforts to combat terrorism, the threat persists, evolving into new forms and spreading to different regions. Terrorism continues to pose complex challenges to global security, testing the resilience of nations and communities worldwide. What are your thoughts on terrorism in today's world? How do you perceive its impact on society, geopolitics, and international relations? Share your perspectives in the comments below. If you found this information insightful, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to our channel for more thought-provoking content on important global issues. Your engagement helps us continue to bring you valuable insights and perspectives. Wendy Global Studio, 17 Black Chronicles. God bless the nation.